Hello, story lovers and storytellers, and welcome back to Once Upon a Time, the podcast for all your storytelling needs. Yay! With me again is my wonderful fiance Andreas, who is going to be sitting out most of this interview.
We
Before
want to issue a trigger warning.
Yeah, I would.
And a spoiler warning. Please do not listen to this if you are triggered by mentions of you may have to help me here. Rape, attempted and actual
rape. Yeah. Anything in that general category.
Yes. As well as physical and verbal abuse. And yeah, I think that about covers it.
That should about cover it, yeah.
Yes. With me, as you can probably tell, we've got someone else with us. Special guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. How? My name is Rachel Dahl, which is the name I'm currently going under, but I go under R.L. Haas as an author, which will be changing, but we'll get to that. And I am the author of the Alonthiel Chronicles.
Yay! Actually, that's the point. Give me 2 seconds. I want before we get into the interview proper, I want to read an extract from the first book.
Can we please try to do this, as I won't edit this as much. It would be good if we try to keep ourselves.
Yeah, that's fine. I had this planned anyway. So, let's go from. Despite the Gucci sunglasses that now covered her eyes, I had no doubt that Irina was fully aware of my own state of conflicted emotions, as well as my frustration at being once again left in the dark. She was perceptive that way, to an aggravating degree. Yes, I came out. It was getting too hot in there. I did my best to keep my voice even and calm, like she always did, but found that my own irritability was rising to the surface. I went around to the other side of the car and opened the back door to grab my art satchel. Might as well draw while I wait, I mumbled under my breath, careful to ensure that my head was buried far enough in the back seat to escape Irina's excellent hearing. We can't all loll in the sun like glorious and glamorous felines, can we? We're going to Alonthiel. That is a very short snippet of the first book of the Alonthiel Chronicles, called Portals of Water and Wine. Rachel wrote these. When did you? Actually, that's the point. When did you start writing the Alonthiel? The first book.
So it's kind of a complicated question, because actually I need to go look at that, because I was thinking about this as I was getting ready for this interview, in that I kind of started it kind of by mistake, which it wasn't exactly the plan to turn this into a book. It was kind of, I'm just going to do a thing, that I like, and start kind of jotting it down. Because normally I write my novels in November. So, because I participate in National Novel Writing Month, which is the month of November, where everyone who participates writes a 50,000-word novel in the space of 30 days, which is a huge endeavor. It's a huge endeavor. Lots of people do it, surprisingly, but it's huge. It's a huge process. Sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's really, really crap. And so, so I started writing this book in, pardon me, I'm counting, April, May, June, July, August, September, November, December. Yes. So I started writing this book actually in April of 2014 after, it's a bit, like, it's almost embarrassing to say, but I had a dream, and I actually, somewhere in my house, it got moved with me to my new house, turned from, because I scrawled it in a journal, because I used to keep a journal beside my bed, and I would write down, like, random dream nonsense that would come to me. And then I wrote this one down, and I was like, I really like this one. This one's kind of good. Let's kind of just sit down and see where it goes. And so the first thing I actually wrote, which will come as no surprise to anyone who knows my methodology and how I write books, which is annoying. I wrote there's a scene in the middle where they're in the van. And they're talking and they're driving in the van on the way to Alonthiel, and that's actually the first thing I ever wrote in the book, was 3 people in a van driving to a magical place. And then the very next thing I wrote, which was part of the dream, was the dinner, the big dinner that they all had. So, and then the very next thing I wrote after that, I wrote this on the same day. I wrote the van scene, I wrote the dinner, and I wrote the swimming scene. Those 3 scenes are the first things I wrote. In no particular order, just random documents, just wrote, start a new document, wrote, start a new document, wrote, start a new document, like just did that. And then I'm like, okay, this could become a thing. And I kind of started piecing it together, thinking about it more, filling in the gaps with other sections of the dream until all of a sudden it kind of took on a life of its own and became what it is now.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. I think that more or less covers my first question. How did Alonthiel come to be?
Yeah, I have to give credit where credit is due. I did not name, let me be really transparent here. I did not name Alonthiel. I did not name Naya. And I did not name my villain in the second book. Well, I kind of did. So Alonthiel and Naya, both of those names came from my friend Monica, who I think you know Monica through the writer group, Monica Barger. She's like she's like a fairy on Earth. She's like this most ethereal, like beautiful, wispy human being, like really like in touch with like nature and spirituality. She's just this fantastic human. That's cool. She kind of became my sounding board when I was writing. I'd be like, okay, I need a name for this thing. And she'd respond with like a bunch of ideas. And I kept putting, so when I was writing, I had a placeholder. I just kept putting the place. Came to the place, went to the place, going to the place. And I finally write her and I'm like, I can't keep calling it the place. I can't publish a book and call it the place. And I don't even remember how it kind of came about, but she wrote me. I remember her saying, what about Alonthiel? And I was like, yep. Yep, that'll do it. So yeah, that's where a lot of the names came from, were from other people. The villain in the second book, which is, this is a bit of a tangent, but I will say this. The villain in the second book is named after my sister's evil ex-boyfriend, Travis. His name is Travis.
Oh dear.
My now current fiance. So I named him Travis to kind of eviscerate my sister's horrible ex-boyfriend in fiction, and then 2 years later, actually 3 years later, get engaged to a guy named Travis, which he thinks is hilarious.
I'm not surprised. I think that's hilarious too. Go on.
I have a little question. What are your influences of writing these books? Do you have any authors that you have inspired you? Because Alonthiel to me sounds a lot like something out of Tolkien's universe.
Tolkien has a big influence on me. The biggest influences on the book are, actually a couple more are, people never believe this when I say it, the Outlander series by Diane. Oh my goodness, I'm about to make a fool of myself. I cannot think of her last name out of a.
Well, that can be solved later.
Yes, I'll fix that. By Diane, I believe it's Galbraith, but I could be pronouncing it incorrectly. I will Google it and find out because I'm just
I was just about to say I can
not knowing my favorite author's last name. It is Diane. Oh my goodness. I'm humiliating myself. Diana
Gabaldon.
Gabaldon, that's what it is. I'm not a terrible person. I'm not a terrible fan. I promise.
No, you're not.
The Outlander series was huge. Was absolutely huge because I was starting to watch it as I wrote the first book, and I have this very weird quirk that I cannot write in silence. I would either use a playlist or watch TV while writing. So a lot of that would like seep into my subconscious. So that there's actually a lot of Outlander feel that kind of flows through it, as well as of course Tolkien and Lewis. They've been huge influences in my life since I was very, very small.
Yeah.
Huge influences. Lewis is the first book I ever picked up and like read properly.
When you say Lewis, you're meaning C.S. Lewis, right?
I do mean C.S. Lewis, yes.
Right.
And then also Tamora Pierce, who is actually misspoke. I would say that I watched the the Chronicles of Narnia movies first, but the first fantasy book I ever picked up and held in my hands and read was a book by Tamora Pierce from her Song of the Lioness Quartet, who, if you haven't read her and you like fantasy books, I cannot sing her praises high enough. She is she is one of like the best fantasy authors. Bluntly, I would go so far as to say in the world. She's absolutely riveting and powerful and just magical, and I adore her. So she had a lot of influence, and of course Neil Gaiman. An absolute crap ton of Neil Gaiman just influence on that book. In fact, when I published both books, I always tweet.
I remember this.
I tweet at the beginning, the day before I publish my book, before it comes out, I always tweet 4 people. I tweet Stephen King, I tweet Tamora Pierce, I tweet Neil Gaiman, and I tweet Amanda effing Palmer. I won't say her what the name she's adopted on here because it's keep it PG, but it's not effing. That's what she goes by. And I tweet those 4 people every time before I start a show, theater brain, before I release a book. And twice now, Tamora Pierce and Neil Gaiman have tweeted me back.
Cool.
Which they are
is awesome.
And in my office. Those tweets are printed out and framed in my office, which is...
Incidentally, on a slight side note, I've been getting adverts for Neil Gaiman doing a masterclass on Masterclass, and I'm just like, I cannot afford this, and I know.
It's on my bucket list is to do the Neil Gaiman, and even the Stephen King. Yeah. Stephen King does one as well, and I want to do it so badly.
In that way, as you cannot have silence, you remind me a lot of what I've heard about Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He always have Bach's violin sonatas on when he's writing.
Yes.
Yellow Roses and Bach, or he can't write.
Yes, and I'm very much that way. I think every writer has a quirk that they kind of have to have when they're writing, and mine is every book kind of has a background with it. So the first one was a lot of Outlander and a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. A lot. Because I'd watch it and then I'd forget that I'd watch it, so I'd go back and watch the episode again. Except I start writing in the middle, then I'd forget again. So I go back and rewind it. So a lot of Buffy. And then the second one is a lot of Scandal and a lot of Grey's Anatomy, because I was watching a lot of that kind of trashy TV in the middle. So the second one was a lot of Scandal. There's a lot of Scandal in the second book.
Talking of the second book, both books, for me, there's definitely, and I know that I'm jumping ahead in questions and I'm probably going to not necessarily do them in order, but there's a lot of kind of Christian undertone and Christian influence. There's more so in the second book. How did kind of that factor into the whole process?
So, like I said, C.S. Lewis is a big influence. And Lewis often says that he never meant to write The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as allegorical as it came out. Everyone's like, no, it was intentional, it was an allegorical, blah, blah. He's bluntly been quoted as saying that wasn't the plan, that wasn't the intent. Yeah. So anyone that sits on it as an allegory is basically misrepresenting him as an author. So every time a chance I get, I always say, it's not an allegory. It can be, but that's not how it was intended. No. And that kind of happened with the second book as well, because it, again, wasn't intended to be as allegorical as it apparently decided it wanted to be. Because the second book is just like, the first book, it's there, but not as much. The second book, it's like, in your face, and it's right there. And I almost debated between, in the particular scene in the second book that involves the first king.
Yes.
That scene is the most allegorical scene in the entire series, as of yet.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be an in-your-face Christian book because, let's be real, there's words in my book that wouldn't be in the average Christian book.
I have another thought here.
Go on.
And I read biographies about Lewis when I was a teenager, when I was like, I have been a very hardcore C.S. Lewis fan, and today I can like his sci-fi work much more than I ever appreciate Narnia, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
I'm the opposite.
The thing is that I studied religion in university, and I've read a lot of Christian mysticists, which really greatly connects to Lewis' sci-fi work rather than to Narnia. Narnia are fantastic books. And you have to think of that Lewis was not a Christian until quite late in his life.
That's very, very accurate. Yeah. And what is often forgotten is people are always like, well, Lewis wrote these big allegories and then there's Tolkien. But you have to remember that it was Tolkien and Lewis sitting in a booth, in a bar, in a pub in Oxford, talking and comparing manuscripts. And their works are very closely intertwined, even though people don't want to give the credit where it's due, because they were best friends. They were constantly sharing all their work together.
The Inklings.
The Inklings, yes.
Yes. before it became a type of squid in what's it called?
Yeah.
Why can I not remember the name of the game? The Inklings now tend to refer to have you ever seen? You probably haven't. As someone who games to a certain extent, it's.
Oh yes, I know what you're talking about. I can't even. I know what you're talking about.
I can't remember the name. It's seriously annoying. Basically, you have a look on your face, Andreas. It's no, it's a game where you're trying to capture the amount of. You're trying to capture the most land and stuff, and they're called and the creatures are called Inklings because they use paint and they use paint.
Platoon.
Yes, that's it. Platoon.
That's a random tangent, but it's yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was like, I don't remember the name. But still, it's now synonymous with Splatoon. But it's but before that, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis basically was part of a club of writers in Oxford who wrote stories.
Gentlemen.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, because
Lewis Tolkien, there was one other man. If you bear with me, I'll tell you in a second. I always feel so bad forgetting this other gentleman.
Not all of them were authors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But they were academics.
Yes.
Yes. Which I think
It involved lots of different people, because it wasn't just the three of them. They became very close, but it was people like Lord David Cecil, Hugo Dyson, Adam Fox, Richard, William D. Marsh, Robert Harvard. Like it was.
Yeah.
And eventually it did come to include Christopher Tolkien, who was J.R.R. Tolkien's son. So it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
That is
Now I
seriously
am
cool.
going to introduce a quite controversial theory, but out of autobiographies I read on Tolkien, I have a suspicion that Tolkien might have had some form of lighter autism.
I believe that, and I agree with that sentiment profoundly. Yeah. I really do. I truly do. I truly do.
I find this conversation interesting.
Languages.
Wow, that's quite a lot of languages.
Yeah, and he was really specialized into Norse mythology, which is
awesome and fantastic and wonderful. Norse mythology is cool.
Yeah, but I want to come back a bit more to the Alonthiel series.
Yes, because we've gone off on a massive tangent, which is kind of okay, but at the same. So,
I have a book here that I read a few years ago, and I reviewed, and I have it signed by the author.
Actually, very nice. Okay, so
it's named "There Is Nothing to Be Afraid of," and it's about religious abuse in the faith movement in the early 90s. And I wonder, where did your way into writing about abuse come from?
Okay, so it kind of came from two different sides of the same coin. So thing number one, it came from my background with spiritual abuse, which spiritual abuse to me is very different than any other kind of abuse because it comes from a location of faith. And I think that faith is one of the most fragile pieces and also one of the strongest pieces of a human being. And when you enter, I will use modern Christianity because that's where mine occurred. I'm very, very careful to always say abuse could occur in any religion and any faith basis, but mine comes from modern Christianity. So that's where I speak of. Because I've not experienced it in any other faith circle, but I know it exists. To me, I grew up in a very conservative background. I grew up in a very fundamental background. Fundamentalism was my bread and butter growing up. It's just how we were. Everything was very cut and dry. This is how it is because the Bible says it's this. This is how it will be. And if you don't walk that line, then there's the door. And so that is how I grew up. Profoundly how I grew up. There was no black, there was no gray. It was black and white. This is bad, this is good. And this is what we say is good, so this is what is good. And you don't have any say in the matter. Which, to me, then growing up and experiencing the things I did in my marriage, with my life as a whole, kind of was a lot of dissonance for me, which is where a lot of my writing about the abuse of spirituality comes from. I write about this not just in fiction, but I also have a pretty decent following on my Facebook and blog as well, regarding spiritual and religious abuse. Particularly for me in the last 2 years, it came to an almighty head, and I no longer, I don't attend church anymore. I've stepped fairly far back from religion, not from faith, but from religion as a whole. They are very separate things to me.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Yes.
Because the main character in this book, they try to drive out his epilepsy as it is a demon.
Yep.
That's no.
This guy, I know him, and he had an epilepsy that was accelerating, so they had to do a brain surgery on him to keep it under control, basically.
Yep.
My one other friend were helping him writing the first draft for this book.
That's awesome.
So
that's really cool.
And
But I very profoundly, like, I personally have post-traumatic stress disorder and anxiety disorder.
yeah.
And I take medication for that.
Yep.
God help me, because the church has a lot of opinions about taking medication. To which I can say, fight me. My health is more important than your opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and
I mean,
here I can see a difference from the church you come from to the church I belong to, because I have a woman in my church who dedicated basically more or less half her work life to people with mental illnesses.
that's awesome. That's how it should be.
Yeah.
How it is here.
I'm very, very blessed in that the church that I go to is and Andreas will back me up on this, it's open, it's welcoming, it accepts you for who you are, not who they want you to be.
It's
As
not.
it should be.
Yeah. Which
for, like, in my book, in the first one, and more in the second one, actually, are a couple who are both men and are married. And when I wrote that in there, certain people in my life were like, that's got to go, because that can't be in there, because that's just not appropriate. To which I, again, clearly ignored them, because not only did they stay in the book, but they became fairly focal characters in the second book.
Yeah, they did. And the relationship that they had is actually quite, if I remember correctly, it's actually quite a sweet one.
I love them. I love them to pieces, especially in the second book. They were very much, I knew I wanted them to have more than they did in the first, but it kind of took on more of a life of its own. I say this often, that I kind of just sit at the keyboard and then my characters run away from me and just do what they want to do.
Which I think is okay.
Yeah.
Like, Harris was not meant to be what he became.
Okay.
I was very careful not to mention him up until, because I know we start on Harris. This conversation could go a whole way, because Harris is everyone's favorite for some reason.
I wonder why. Sorry.
He's absolutely.
For those
he's my favorite too.
For those who haven't read the book, Harris is one of the main character Naya's best friends. Him and her other best friend Irina, who I mentioned in the excerpt at the beginning, have been dating for goodness knows how long, probably half their lives or something.
More than half their lives, yes.
Yeah, and they turned up when Naya was going through a difficult patch. If you want to know what the difficult patch is, go read the book. Seriously. And here's the thing. Harris is such a character. He is cheeky. He wears hats. And we're further on in, and yes, massive spoilers for this part. He has blue skin.
He's blue. He's like a human mood ring, and he's only blue when he's like really, when he feels comfortable where he's at. So like he's not just blue like in the regular world.
Yeah.
But he's also, when he gets really emotional, his skin will like start to darken. Normally it's a nice, I'm trying to describe like where a good color would be. He's a nice average, I guess, Union Jack blue. That's his normal skin tone, is a nice just blue. But if he gets really like into it, it deepens into like a midnight sky type blue. If he's more like apathetic about something or upset or sick, it fades out into a more light, washed out blue. It's very easy to tell where he's at based on his skin color.
Yes. do you want to talk about the fact that you, that according to you, we had a little bit of a conversation before we started. You wrote your fiance into your book.
By mistake,
current
yes.
fiance.
So Harris is a very outlandish, loud. He's loud, quirky, crazy, just wild man, just absolute. And originally he was inspired on three brothers who I'm very, very good friends with.
Okay.
If you took these three brothers and just mushed them into one, that's pretty much where Harris came from, except for the fact that Harris irons his underwear, and that is a nod to my very best friend in the world, Michael, because my best friend irons his underwear, and I've been mocking him for this since the 9th grade. But when I met my fiance, people started posting things about him on social media. People started telling me, I don't remember who was the first person that was like, he really sounds like Harris. And then the more I think about it, he's not blue, so that part's out. But he is eccentric. He's loud. He wears hats. He has a massive hat collection, like a huge hat collection. He is romantic. He's charming. He's very, very much, screw it. I could die. Who cares? Type person.
Yeah.
That's very, very much my fiance. That's very, very, very much Harris. And when I wrote Harris, I had not even met
There's also the fact, and you haven't mentioned this yet, he's a clown. Literally, his job is that he is a clown.
His job is, yes, he works at a haunted house, and he is legitimately a clown. A scary clown, but a clown. And Harris is very much this clown dork flopping all over the place. Like, just this madcap personality, and that's very, very much the man I'm marrying as well. So it's kind of hilarious that I've kind of wrote him into existence.
I also have another question about these books, and do you find it easier? I have PTSD myself, and I've had it now since I was about 13, 14, 15.
Yep.
Do you find it easier to cope with your PTSD when you have been writing, or has it played up more?
That's a fantastic question, because so this is a very good question. So here's how I know if I'm healthily handling my PTSD. I'm writing. Here's how I know if I'm not healthily handling my PTSD. I'm not writing. That's pretty much that's my good benchmark is, am I healthily handling my mental illness? Yes? Cool. Stuff's getting written. Am I not healthily handling my mental illness? Nothing's being written, because writing is very transparent for me, and I don't feel like feeling when I'm not handling my mental illness well. But quite honestly, my writing took a massive hiatus in the last 2 years. The second book came out in, I believe, 2016, if I'm remembering my own life correctly.
I think it's something like that, because I asked Rachel for I bought both the online Kindle version, but also a signed copy of the hardback version.
Yes, that was quite the endeavor shipping. You were my only overseas order, and it was absolutely bananas. Oh my goodness, that was an adventure. But yes, the second book did come out in 2016.
Yeah.
And that is kind of where everything collapsed in my personal life. Was the beginning of 2017.
Yeah.
So it just kind of became where I didn't write. I didn't handle things appropriately or things well, and so I stopped writing, and I wasn't really allowed to write. per se, let's say. I wasn't really
Right.
permitted to write because it took away from the things that someone else thought I should be accomplishing, which...
Right.
So I took a back seat. And then when I started my divorce and started working, spending more time with Travis, it was like, he's like, you need to start writing. Which is hilarious because the man has never read my book. I love him, but he's not a reader. He's like, make audiobooks, I'll listen to them, but I'm not a reader.
Huh.
Okay.
But to his credit, he's not a reader. He has ADHD, and so reading means sitting and focusing, and he's like, nope. My brain doesn't do that. But to his credit, he has read, I believe he's read the first couple chapters of the first one.
Nice.
So he's trying.
Also, if only you knew somebody who was willing to record them.
What? No, I don't know anyone who can do that. And that would be something spectacular. I do eventually want to get audiobooks done of all of the books with us working together.
Well,
before.
Well, we have for those people who picked up on my sarcasm, because obvious sarcasm is obvious. There was a point when I was wanting to was trying to record the first book. So that people could actually just listen to it. The only problem was due to time constraints and going out with people and also life in general, it kind of got put on the back burner. And
it really did, but I really do want to get back to it because I think it would just be fantastic. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yes. I think it's one of those projects that's going to happen once I move. Maybe.
And we all have time because it's a very time-consuming project.
It is. It's very time-consuming.
Editing.
Good point. Yes. Chestnut.
And I do have a third book I should probably write here at some point.
Oh yes, that's a point. So, how is the third book going?
There's about 10,000 words of the first book that exist.
Yay!
For perspective, the first book has 90,000 words. Just for perspective as to where we're at with that. So, yay, 10,000. Boo, 80,000 more to go. So, because I didn't want them to be like Tolkien or Rowling level long because they're bricks, and I don't want anyone to like have like a. Some people love that, some people don't, and I want them to be like a nice middling size between brick and wafer. So in the middle. But it does. I am working on it. It's hard. I will say that writing the first book was a breeze compared to writing book number 2, because book number 2 has a little something that's a jerk called continuity.
Yep.
Which means you have to go back to the first book and sit and be like, oh, that happened. Have to make sure that gets referenced. And you don't change someone's hair color or someone's eye color or where someone's from or accidentally. No, I completely screwed up the second book. And my editor, Amy, caught it. She's like, this didn't happen in the first book. And you reference a whole thing that didn't happen at all in the first book. And I'm like, oh, crap. So I had to go back and rewrite a massive middle section of the second book to make it actually so it was flowing. Yeah. And the timeline's a thing. And like, oh my goodness. Like
yes.
Here I got a tip from the Swedish writer Claes Östergren. He's a real prodigy. He published his first real novel when he was like 17, 18.
Oh, wow.
But he has these sheets of paper, and I have a whole book which is a giant 180 pages long interview with him.
Oh, wow.
And they
That's
published on the inside covers, they have his synopsises for 2 of his most famous books.
Nice.
That's
In
cool.
that way, he could keep track of continuity.
Yeah. A lot of my
That's
author friends get index cards and like tape them on the wall and do like a storyboard type thing like they do in the movies where everything just kind of flows. I don't do that because I don't write in order. Well, that's my biggest thing, as I never have ever written in order. I do not start with the first sentence and end with the last. I start in the middle and I branch outward all directions, and then somehow we all come back to a tiny knot in the middle. Somehow.
Yeah.
Somehow. Don't
ask me how I do it. I stress myself out doing it that way, but it's the only way I know how to do it.
Yeah.
That's okay, though. I think everyone has a different kind of writing style. I know that I'm very much let's start at the beginning, work through the story that you're doing, get to a close, and then go back and do it.
I can't do that. I simply can't. It doesn't work. For me, it's just like I'm literally spinning my wheels. It feels like I'm like nothing is happening. Nothing is being done. I need to. Because I gotta write what comes to my head, and sometimes it's like the bread scene in the second book. That's the first thing I ever wrote. That's the first thing I ever wrote.
The bread scene was awesome.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the whole series. Is that scene?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. One of the things that comes out from reading the books, you love food.
I do.
It's so obvious. I mean, the lasagna scene in the first book,
which people talk about constantly. I don't know what's in that flipping lasagna I love so much, but people love that scene, and that gets referenced to me. The 3 things people talk to me about the most in the book are Harris, the lasagna, and the dinner, because of like the setting, like the lights and the trees and all of that. But the food has always been like my thing. I love to cook. Actually, I was not allowed to watch normal kids programming growing up, like my parents thought it would. My parents had a high standard when it came to education and all the kind of things. So I never watched Sesame Street or Teletubbies or anything like that growing up. I watched Julia Child. That's what I watched. So I have been watching Julia Child, Jacques Pepin, like old black and white Julia Child stuff, like from her first days when she was a young woman. Well, young because she started when she was like 45, but like younger than her 80-year-old, 90-year-old self who was doing cooking down the road. And I taught myself to cook, but the problem is, my mother used to joke about this. I can't cook without talking now. I have to talk myself through it while I'm cooking, because when you learn how to cook watching cooking shows, they talk through every step.
Yeah.
Yes,
so now my brain literally talks through every step, like Julia Child or Jacques Pepin or Odine or anything like that. Angela Lawson or anything like that. I can't do it without talking, and it made my mother crazy. She's like, stop talking, just be quiet and cook. Because my mother didn't cook. My mother does not like cooking at all. So from the time I was old enough to handle it, I made dinner.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because I was just good at it, and I liked doing it.
Incidentally, the whole bit with in the come on, brain, work, please. In the lasagna scene, you mention about courgettes, which is what we call zucchini over here.
Yes, zucchini. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that something that you picked up from a recipe, or is it just something you added in?
Yes.
Nice.
I cook it that way all the time.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, anything that's in the book, I make myself.
Nice.
You are talking to a person who has an extensive collection of cookbooks. I used to review cookbooks, so I have Julia Child's French Bible.
I do too. It's literally like I have that book. God love Travis. He's like, can we put your? Because they're in a cabinet in my kitchen where I'm 5 feet tall, so I can reach my cookbooks. And he's like, can they not be here? Can they be in a bookshelf? I'm like, no, I need them. He's like, but you don't use them all the time. I'm like, I don't care. I need her presence. I need Julia in my kitchen.
Yeah.
Julia out of my kitchen.
You know,
I adore her. She's
just the attention to detail in Julia Child's recipes.
She truly was.
I listened to a food podcast named, it's with a Swedish cooking personality named Edvard Blom, is a gastronomist. And his co-host said that just make Julia Child's Boeuf Bourgogne. It's worth all the time in this world.
And
because
it takes
just
forever.
those...
And in fact, this is a spoiler for the third book. That is what Naya is making in the scene I'm writing right now with Julia Child's Boeuf Bourgogne, which is huge for me because Julia Child died before I was able to meet her, which is a running joke with my family. Rachel needs to stop wanting to meet people because the people she wants to meet die. Steve Irwin died. Brian Jakes, who was another one of my huge writing influences. If you don't know the Redwall series, it's amazing. Died. Alan Rickman died. Julia Child died. So I need to stop wanting to meet people because then they die.
To be fair, Neil Gaiman's still alive.
True. For now.
Yeah.
Unless I kill him.
You won't.
But no, cooking to me is one of like the most calming, soothing. Like a lot of people are like they come home from work. Like I work a full-time job. I have 3 daughters. I have a fiance. I have a house to run. I have books I write. I mean, I'm a crazy person running around. And so Travis will come home. He's like, I'll do dinner. I'm like, no, do not take my one calming thing from me. I will do dinner. Handle everything else, please. I will do dinner. And that is my thing. Don't. And I'm starting to have to be a little more okay, you could cook because he's an exceptionally good cook as well.
Oh, good.
So, and there are things that he makes that I cannot duplicate. So I'm like, okay, fine. I want this. You have to make it. I'm sorry. Let me help.
My dear darling knows how I am when cooking.
Yeah. Both of us like cooking. I'll admit I'm not as confident as Andreas because I'm, bearing in mind, I've only lived away from home for about 4 years, something like that. And my mum used to make most of the meals. I used to make some, but not loads.
Right.
And one of the things I'm beginning to get into is a routine of doing slow cooker crock pot meals because it works so well.
It does. It saves so much time.
It's like you put it on, you go to work, you come back, you turn it off, you have hot food. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So my mum gave me a slow cooker book. My dad gave me a slow cooker book. And then Andreas, bless him. Bless you dearly, sweetheart. Andreas gave me 2 slow cooker pudding books. They're both American. No offense to Americans, by the way.
But the thing was that the recipes were mainly with powders.
It's packet mix. Some of the recipes are packet mixes, and I'm just like,
you can't get there.
Well, we can.
Just they're not as good.
But
the thing is that I come from a family with a dad who's allergic to something that's hidden in everything.
Yes.
Cornstarch.
Oh no.
Yep.
So I am trained to learn to cook from scratch.
Without it, from scratch. Yep.
Yeah.
It makes Travis crazy. He's like, let's have spaghetti. I'm like, well, I need 2 hours to do that because I'm going to make the sauce. He goes, it takes 5 minutes. It's in the jar. I'm like, no, it is not. I will make it.
It's the same thing. I live in a collective house.
Crazy.
So I have to cook for 30 people every now and then.
Yep.
And I get
Yep.
disgusted when people buy these pre-made spice sackets for like tacos and stuff like that. You
It's just like
blend your own. It's an art. You have to
It's a
taste.
balance. It's practice. Yes.
I used to do cooking show. So there are episodes of me cooking on YouTube.
I'll have to go
Actually,
find
So
them.
you wouldn't
I will have to go
understand
find
a
them as
thing.
well. Yes, you need to put links in this. You need to put links for those in the description.
Sweetheart.
Quite seriously. Yeah.
Swedish only.
Would it be in Swedish?
And I can
Oh,
still learn.
I probably can figure it out.
Yeah. But
I'm sure I'll figure it
to
out as
come
well.
back, I think we should try to come back to the books.
That's a good idea.
Tangents are fun. What?
Tangents are awesome. But yes.
But no, food is a very big theme in the both of the books. It kind of carries all the way through.
Yeah,
And
it is awesome.
cooking is also an important part of life.
Yeah.
Especially if you read certain types of books, like Jane Austen has some very famous dinner scenes in her books.
Yep.
I just listened to them when I was ill earlier this year, just for the sake of us getting married in the church we are getting married.
Oh, for those of you who don't know, the church we're getting married in was the church where Jane Austen's parents got married.
That's awesome. That
Yes,
makes me
it
very
is.
excited. I'm a huge Jane Austen fan, so that makes me very, 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 very excited.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
it also happens to be the church that my brother goes to and my mum used to go to, which means I can get married there without actually having to attend that church.
Awesome. That's
Which
cool.
is great, because it means I can carry on going to my church.
yeah.
What's actually really fun is while we're talking, I have the book on my phone. So I'm literally kind of like scrolling through, reminding myself, oh yeah, that happened. Oh yeah, I wrote that.
Another question is how, in this era of Me Too, how did the thought of writing about rape come into the picture?
Yeah. So the first book, it's implied. The first book, it's very much, it's not, I never explicitly write anything of any form that is assault per se. The first book, there's the scene in the very, very beginning with her brother, which...
Stepbrother.
Her stepbrother, yes, which is, it's alluded to that he's been a bit creepy, a bit looky-loo, a bit touchy, but no flat-out assault. He's mostly aggressive physically and mostly verbally, just a jackass, pardon my French. But he's just a terrible, terrible human being. In the second, I believe the second book, I believe it's the second book, and I have to go refresh my own memory, is where it's a lot more, the second book went a lot further with it, if I'm remembering my own writing correctly, where I've been asked many times why I did this, and why I chose to. Yes, it is the first one. It's the second. It's the second book. The first time that she encounters Tremace.
Yes.
It's not just a physical assault, but it's also a mental assault as well. Because he gets inside her mind. Spoiler alert, he gets inside her mind and gets inside her her psyche and just starts like ripping her apart. And like she's dying and she almost does die and she almost does die.
And then yes.
The very good thing happens after that, which is a huge spoiler that I'm not saying a word about that reason. That's a huge spoiler for both books. So just that was a non-disclosure. But man, I want to go back and read my own book again. I forgot what happened in that. I want to read it again. But part of it is because I wanted, in no uncertain terms, for people to understand that it's not just a physical thing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for me, and it wasn't for anyone of my know that I've walked alongside who has experienced that. That it's not just a physical violation; it's a mental one. And so, with Gervais being the way he is, quite bluntly, the first villain that I wrote in the first book was a typical baddie. Like, she's a bad person. She's just pretty much crap. She's just not a good person. She's evil. She has an agenda. She has a goal. Her goal is very, very basic. Get revenge on people who hurt me.
Yes.
The end. Like, it's a very, very common revenge.
Which for some reason, no, and I'm not saying what reason, but for some reason, it includes Naya.
Yes, it does include Naya. It includes anyone who hurts her, which it does include Naya, at first indirectly and then directly. But in the second book, Gervais is a far more insidious villain.
Yeah.
He's far more insidious because his villainy is genocide, basically. It goes from being his forerunner in villainy. I almost just gave something huge away. Whoops. His forerunner in villainy from the first book had a focused attack on this family, on these people specifically. Gervais is a homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
And a sociopath. He's bluntly a sociopath. And he's just...
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a Hitlerian figure in many respects. Which, to me, writing that when it was happening, because the date in which the book was published was 2016. Which means it was out in 2017 during one of the most tumultuous periods in American politics ever. In which my country is dealing with something on a political level that boggles my mind. And I don't want to get too political, but I do say that my book is a declarative statement directed at that.
Yeah.
In a big, big way. And I won't pretend it's not. Because it absolutely is. I was writing it and finishing it during the election. I was finishing sections during the debate. Like, I was writing chunks, watching the debates, and sitting on the floor with my laptop, writing stuff as it came out of certain people's mouths. And so it's so much more than just a bad guy with an agenda. It's a whole nod to the Me Too movement, to American politics, to the church as a whole, targeting select groups of which I am a member, ripping apart on so many levels.
Yeah.
And bluntly, I look now back and realize I also wrote my ex-husband into that character as well, which I fully own, didn't know it then, clearly see it now. So, it's just everything icky and evil in one body. Just
I interviewed an artist calling herself Gassel Twin, which has been writing, among other things, about the exploitation that you can feel in a changing room as a 14-year-old.
Oh, my nose, I apologize. Stepped away from the microphone so you wouldn't hear that.
That's fine. There's one question I've been meaning to ask, which may seem like an odd question. There was one bit of the first book that I got slightly confused by.
Yes, clarify.
How did the mirrors get swapped?
Okay, people ask me. You're not the first person to ask me this.
Okay.
So, so let me try to find the section and answer that question, because I do say it. It is in there. I gotta find it. Scrolling for 30 years.
It's like almost the last chapter, but not quite.
Yes, it is. It's in chapter 27. Nope.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah.
Sorry, 5. 25. The mirrors get switched. They set up the incident that is occurring when the mirrors get switched. And there is a traitor.
Right.
There is a traitor. We will not find out the name of the traitor until book 4.
Okay.
But there is a traitor. So there is someone who is working for the other side that appears to be a friend.
Of course there is.
Yes.
Okay.
And who it is gonna blow everybody's mind.
I'm not gonna try and guess then.
No, don't you? I mean, people decide. I will not give it away. But who it is will absolutely. It will shake the core of the fandom from the top to the bottom.
Wow.
People will hate me.
Okay.
So that's all I will say about that. But it will shake the fandom from top to bottom.
I'm really hoping it's not Travis or sorry, Harris or Irina.
I can tell you for a fact that I'm not telling you who it is.
That's fine. Oh, that's just... Yes, it's almost as bad as the ending of book 1.
People were very mad at the end of book 1. I would get... They were like, I'm almost done with it. I'm like, okay. 20 minutes later, a day later... What the heck did you do? Which is what I wanted. That's the reaction I wanted. I wanted people to be livid by the end.
Yeah.
I remember I read it and I was like, okay, I'm on the last bit. And then you have that last sentence and it's like, what?
Yeah, that's fun. That's fun to do as an author. It's fun to take something you think you know what's happening. You think you're like, okay, well, this is what has occurred. This is the logical point A to point B.
And then suddenly you throw a complete spanner in the works, and it's like, well, there's got to be a second book now.
It's my favorite thing to do.
Yes,
and it was awesome. People got so bad. They got so bad, and it was so wonderful.
Incidentally, for those people listening, if you have not read the book and want to find out what happens, go and read the book. I know I've already said it once, but I keep saying this. It's worth reading it. Just be prepared for some ever so slightly graphic parts.
Yes, and there's no, like, the most graphic I ever get, I don't actually get all that gross when it comes to, like, violence and stuff. I just keep it, because when I wrote it, I read it in my head for how I want to see it on a screen, should some wonderful person ever decide to turn it into a film. But, so there's a lot of very clear, distinct things that I want, but also I tried to keep it from being super gory. Will not say that for the third book, because the third book, we've been building up to what that third book's going to be.
The third book is, I'll be honest, I'm quite curious about what's going to happen in the third book, because
Me too.
And I mean, if George R.R. Martin can get away with being gory in mainstream,
point.
Actually,
I will say that the third and fourth books, there's going to be a lot more death than there's been. And I mentioned this, like I said, we find out something absolutely monumental in the third and fourth books that, as I was saying earlier, I say it, that will shake the fandom, and it will, because it will take someone you've thought you've known this entire time and just
turn the person over.
Yeah. And it's going to be very, very catastrophic for both the book characters and also for the people who are reading the book as well. Yeah. And I have no regrets.
Okay.
I'm going to. Everyone's going to hate me, but I'm not saying what I'm doing. I'm going to keep that.
That's fine.
Keep some mystery. But
you
no,
should not spoil, because a book in writing can change during write process as well.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing. Like with this, I've known this was happening. That what's going to happen in book probably 4. I've known is going to happen since I started writing book 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
I think we should try to conclude this now, as we are up in more than an hour now.
Yeah.
And you don't want to run too long episodes.
I agree. Do you have any other questions you want to ask?
One last question, if we may. If I may, sweet. Yeah. Do you have any advice for people who are wanting to write or self-publish or anything like that?
Yes. If you're going to write, just do it. Which sounds really cliche and dumb, but you can keep saying, well, I might. You just sit down, and this is my recommendation to all I actually do I run a coaching service for writers who are wanting to start out and write. And the number one thing I tell my students is, I want you to open up a document, and I want you to set a timer for 15 minutes. Not a long timer, just 15 minutes of your day. And I want you to open up a brand new, empty, blank, white document. And I want you to type stream of consciousness, whatever comes to your head, for like don't say like the wall is white, the clouds are blue, the sky is blah blah. Type something like fiction. If you're wanting to write fiction, give yourself a prompt and just start writing on that prompt for 15 minutes. Then save the document, shut the document, and don't touch it for a week. Like, don't look at it, don't play with it, write it, close it, ignore it for a week. Then come back and look at it with fresh eyes and be like, okay, so what in this is usable? What in this do I like? Did I like where my brain took this? What did I create? And 9 times out of 10, it will turn into something. 9 times out of 10, it'll turn into something. There's always that one that says, like, no, that was poop. Trying again. Then we do it again. But don't, just get it out on the paper and then look at it afterwards. That's why I love NaNoWriMo so much. You just write and write and write and write and write. And then when you're done, and it's December 1st, then you sit and edit out all the garbage and all of the useless blathering that's in there for no reason. And you hone it and make it pretty. But don't worry about making it pretty. Just get the words out. And then make it pretty afterwards.
Yes.